Can we please stand for the playing of the national anthem of our beloved Republic? Representatives of U.S. Ecomos, Mr. Eric Stolheim and Stephanie Sita. I see also the President of the Greater San Fernando Chamber is here, Mr. Kiran Singh. Representatives of the United States Embassy. Specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, also members of the media, my colleagues. Welcome to this very special occasion. It certainly warms my heart as someone who was born in San Fernando and who grew up in San Fernando, in the heart of it. The city by the Gulf, and a city that's easy to love. It's something that I share with His Worship and so many of us who would have spent time in this magnificent city of ours. I've also grown close to the National Trust as well over the last year and a half. I own a little home down in Sita, near the sea on the Columbus Channel. And the Trust has been very active in coming and exploring this magnificent land we call Trinidad and Tobago. U.S. Ecomos is also here, and I'm so happy to see that the United States has taken an interest in this island of ours, and particularly this beloved city of San Fernando. This evening we're going to be seeing a very special presentation from their findings and from U.S. Ecomos as they tell us more about their extraordinary findings and, of course, our city. And I failed to mention earlier on, Dr. Bridget Brenton is also here with us, Professor of History at the University of West Indies, now retired, I believe. We spent a lot of time on television together many years ago. And just like so many other people, she came to Trinidad and chose to stay. Legally. I'm excited about this, and we hope that after everything that we've seen here, we will be able to take this back not only to our homes but to the wider world. I recently completed a motion picture based on Alfred Hitchcock's Dial for Murder, which was shot at 19 locations throughout Trinidad. And the opening scene is a car racing up, driving up the San Fernando Hill. Someone who lives abroad, incidentally a European, was looking at the opening of the film, and he said, "Where did you shoot this? Because it looks like the south of France." It was the San Fernando Hill, and the background was the city of San Fernando. It just goes to show that Trinidad and Tobago has so much to offer the entire world, so much that we can showcase. And I think that the National Trust, His Worship, and U.S. Ecomos will be the architects of taking that to the wider world. And I suggest that we give them a round of applause for an initiative that is very overdue. Tony Bennett once sang "I Left My Heart in San Francisco." speaker in its office, he's going to say he left his heart in San Fernando. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our beloved mayor, the man that I'm so proud of, Mr. Junior Regatta.
In the interest of time, permit me to forward the salutation because as he did so eloquently, I would just recognize two persons who I think I need to recognize. So the chairperson of the Trust in San Fernando, this is Ms. Michelle Celestine, and the chairperson for the Street Naming Committee, Ms. Joy Caesar, who is with us this evening. Very special, ladies and gentlemen, this very distinguished audience as we embark on this program recognizing the San Carlos Plaza. It is often said, you can't know where you're going if you don't know where you've been. We respect the city of San Fernando. We have a rich history spanning over 200 years to reference the culture and the identity of our city. The National Trust, under the authority of the Ministry of Planning, has engaged the U.S. Economist International Exchange Program in defining this new historical district in our city, with its reclaimed name, San Carlos Plaza. I grew up in Vistabella, not too far from the San Carlos Plaza, and can recall my early days visiting that area and what it used to be. I'm glad that we have this opportunity to be to revisit this project and look at the historical buildings displayed there. When we look at San Carlos Plaza and we try to understand how it came about, our research tells that Governor Chacon, in those days, I think it was 1792, San Fernando was more or less established, declared that that space provided for exactly what it turned out to be: leisure, pleasure, because of its terrain and its close proximity to the sea. However, Governor Chacon sort of abandoned the project and didn't follow up with it because his interest really was to protect himself in Port of Spain. And so he went up to the capital where he can oversee the harbour and protect himself because his fleet was a very small fleet and the threat of the British was very fearsome. So the San Carlos Plaza really was not followed through. And it's not until Governor Harris came in 1846 that it began to take some shape in terms of some things that he did on the proclamation. The area that I was speaking about, they had basically under Chacon 5 streets: St. Vincent Street, Chacon Street, San Fernando Street, St. James Street. And it's Governor Harris who, between 1846 and 1850, was able to move that amount up to 11 streets. So St. Andrew Street, Tram Street, High Street, Coffee Street, Cepero Street, added to the list to make it very capable and would have made a significant contribution to the development of San Fernando. We all know of the Harris Promenade and its role in taking San Fernando forward, British that is. More to that, those of us who are San Fernandans are very passionate, feel there's a feeling of neglect in San Fernando over the years. How we have been treated, and we can see that it has its genesis with Governor Chacon, who literally abandoned San Carlos Plaza. As we look at that process and we go forward, we now have an opportunity, almost 200 years after, to address the issue. And we need to capitalize on that based on the contribution we made by the Project Trust and other stakeholders. So in this regard, I want to really thank the Trust for the interest and for going forward with this, and because whatever we were told to make it happen. And of course, the two young interns who was approached 3-4 months ago and said that we are available, assigned by the university to research a project in San Fernando, and we have identified the San Carlos Plaza, and if we can facilitate it whatever we can, we decided to do so. This is a tremendous project for us to embark on, for it speaks to San Fernando and the development of the beloved city. As we move forward with the waterfront development that should start shortly, there are several schools of thought what we should do with those buildings, and it's just to get feedback from many persons here this evening who hold on to those buildings, particularly Happy Hour Hotel building, whatever, Black Cat Bar. And you know, that building was so significant to us that if Cepero was living in San Fernando, Trinidad, and had a different team in terms of what it meant to San Fernando's development. That whole area in those days, and those of you who know, was the hub of excitement, hub of activity, and hub of business in San Fernando before the trains came around that period, brought mail from Port of Spain, brought the car from Port of Spain, and they moved the motor sugar cane forward and back through the island. In that space there. So all the hardwares were there, the house of marketing was there, which we refer to as the top buildings where we store the sugar cane and the coffee and the sugar and all the agricultural produce that had been transported to Port of Spain. And from when you look at opposite the post office where W.H. Robinson hardware was, all the hardware in that area from around there. And from where the train station was, where the old TGR building is, almost down to the fish market, is where all the shops, and it wasn't bacon shop as we know it. It was fried bacon and fish. That's all we knew in those days. And the fish was so, slice was so big it's overlapping and falling out the fried bacon. You couldn't see the fried bacon. And the food that we had in the tree, the roti and that sort of thing. So that all those shops they provided food for a very thriving community. The fish of over on one side, we had the laundry and the vessels bring community together for the oil refinery for the pier. The part of vessels for the pier. And we had the tugs and the launch the bridge, bringing the sailors and the men from the ship onto the port. And of course they came to get their goodies and do their shopping and whatever they had to do, especially nocturnal activities. But they did what they had to do and made that area a very business and our city for San Fernando in those days. So we may see that return this glory. Interests that will have in the city of San Fernando, and particularly our Heritage Trust and the two young interns who are with us this evening. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you ever so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I've spent 31 years in the media working for state radio and television. And never have I seen a more proactive mayor for this city and someone who has invested so much love, and I've seen so much progress within a short period of time. And I say that arguably. I'm expected to be corrected, but please, let's give him a round of applause. It's worth it. The level of love that is displayed for this great city of ours. The Ministry of Planning and Development, as a matter of fact, just a couple of months ago, I had the opportunity of having some direct dealing with the ministry. And you know what's fascinating? It's one of the few ministries that actually returns a phone call. Promptly, the same day. I couldn't believe it. I was actually thinking I was in another country at one time. Here to bring us greetings, and this is quite a proactive ministry that I've witnessed within recent times, is the Deputy Permanent Secretary, who is Mrs. Eileen. Oh, our Permanent Secretary is now here. Hi, so this is Mrs. Joanne Deoraj, who is the Permanent Secretary, to bring us greetings on behalf of the Honourable Camille Robinson-Richards.
Chairman of the National Trust of Trinidad and Tobago, representatives of the board of the National Trust of Trinidad and Tobago, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the Ministry of Planning, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Mr. Ovid, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me apologize for my late arrival. You know, you're always coming from the office and you always get delayed, and then of course Fernando always seems, it's just down the road, but it isn't. So I apologize for the few minutes delay, but I'm happy to be here. on behalf of the Honourable Minister of Planning and Development, may I first extend apologies for her absence. But this project and the role of the National Trust, her absence is no a statement of her lack of love, but the business of the state is always priority. But her absolute love for the National Trust and the importance that she placed on this very important portfolio within the Ministry of Planning and Development. So it's a pleasure to be here on her behalf to present our greetings for the work that is being done on Plaza San Carlos Heritage District. Today's presentation will highlight the findings and recommendations of two budding international interns in the field of architectural preservation and conservation from the United States International Council of Monuments and Sites, U.S. Coast. This is the third year that the National Trust has been able to host interns from this international exchange program. And we're very happy to welcome Ms. Stephanie Bristol and Mr. Eric Stadheim, who both have Masters of Science degrees in Historic Preservation and who focused their research on the Plaza San Carlos Heritage District in San Fernando. Plaza San Carlos Heritage District is a very important one in the San Fernando redevelopment of Trinidad and Tobago. You would have heard Mayor speak about the San Fernando Waterfront project. It is a project that we have been driving at the Ministry of Planning and Development for the last few years, and it has several components. And one of them would have been the preservation and development of the historic district of Plaza San Carlos. So it is a pleasure to have these two experts come and help us to identify the different components in this very historical district. San Fernando railway station, the Rodriguez building, the old Thorpes Garage, Happy Corner, fish market and the general stores. San Fernando Waterfront project is moving ahead of pace. It is now under the purview of UNICOT. But the Plaza San Carlos remains one of the key components, as I said. The role of heritage is very important for the Ministry of Planning and Development because many persons do not realize the value, the economic value of what the heritage economy can bring to the development of a small island economy in Trinidad and Tobago. Heritage economies have been driving small islands like Bermuda, Bahamas, and we certainly feel in Trinidad and Tobago that we have equally economic benefits to such historical assets that we have in Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, the heritage economy is part of our Vision 2030 and is part of our development strategy for Trinidad and Tobago. The Ministry, therefore, recognizes the invaluable work and hope that the work that we will gather here today, the information that we gather, will help us to drive this proposal to make the San Carlos Plaza the second historical district in Trinidad and Tobago. As most of you all know, the Woodford Square was already declared as our first heritage district, and therefore the city of San Fernando is positioned to have the second historical district. So the Ministry of Planning and Development recognizes the valuable work and efforts of the National Trust of Trinidad and Tobago and of course the work of the interns. And we do hope that the work that comes out of this, we will follow up as a Ministry of Planning and take the position to the cabinet, achieve all the results that we have anticipated through this project. We will continue to work and support the efforts of the National Trust, and we certainly would like to hear all the presentations as well. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Garage. I would like to also request, and I was discussing it with members of the Trust, that maybe at these buildings that have been identified, if we can put up signs. So maybe the Ministry can get a little budget and put up the signs that this is a historic site or national heritage site or whatever here in Trinidad. And I think that would also pique the interest of our young people, which is so critical and important for them gaining an appreciation for the country as a whole and these buildings and what it means to them as Trinbagonians. I would like now to welcome the chairman of the National Trust of Trinidad and Tobago, because I heard Ms. Deodorant saying that San Fernando is a little bit out of the way. We Southerners consider nowhere in Trinidad a little out of the way, you know that. chairman came all the way to visit me down in Cedros, on the Columbus Channel, like on the southern side of Trinidad. Over there, near my home, are two graves from 1847 by its husband and wife and child who died all at the same time and buried there on this estate, which is called La Verge. The French call it Laurieuse. And also, there's a US tunnel that she visited that runs all the way down to the beach. And when the Americans left in World War II, being innovative Trinidadians, we found it for all sorts of other little activities, because you were able to access the beach and then go straight up to the back. So it's there. And a gun base, a massive gun base, I think the diameter is about 15 feet. The base, almost 20 feet. That gun, I understand, in 1943, the Americans, where my home is, was an American base. Dog tags actually were discovered there, and there's still some dog tags from members of the community who took them and found them. That gun shot out two ships that didn't respond to the Americans. It now makes for a very beautiful reef after 50-something years. And from my home, I can walk into chest-high water. And last year in July, I caught a 4-foot black-tip shark in just chest-high water. So if you want a close experience with Jaws, you could come visit. So, and the reason why I'm saying this is because Mr. Arias, the chairman, took the opportunity to come all the way down here to see all these magnificent sights in Citrus. So I'd like to welcome the chairman of the National Trust, Miss McDowell Thompson. Please give her a round of applause.
Thank you. I think we have to thank our mayor, especially the mayor, for having me here today, because he wanted someone who was not only San Fernando, but very entertaining. So thank you very much for being extremely entertaining so far. Well, okay. Most of you know about the National Trust, but just in case there's somebody who doesn't, this is the commercial. We are a membership-based organization, and anybody who is not yet a member, we have a table at the back there, and you can get your forms, fill it out. For a simple $50, you can be a member a year, $50 a year, you can be a member, and that also entitles you to discounts. And you weekly newsletters where you know everything about ourselves. So I just want to say that that's the little commercial message before I start. So now I would also like to recognize His Worship the Mayor, who you all know very well, our PS, Permanent Secretary, Ms. Joanne Dioraj, and her DPS was newly minted, just come back, and we're very pleased to have you as well. I recognize the business, I'm not seeing him, where's he gone? But there you are, yes. The San Fernando and Greater San Fernando Business Organization, wish to welcome you. There are several members of the Trust Council here. There are other members, many members of the staff, and if you notice, they're all kind of young. That's what we try to do deliberately to make sure we all keep enthusiastic. So they are very young and they're all over the place here, and I wish to recognize you all, and of course our interns. So the National Trust is under Act of Parliament, and we are very lucky to be under the Ministry of Planning and Development, always supporting us. And so we are doing projects all over the Trinidad and Tobago. And part of our mandate is listing heritage sites. Now we have a list. If you go on our website, you will see over 400 sites of interest. Those are not all listed yet. And people are sending more and more as we go along. But what we try to do is to identify some specific sites that we think are just so special that we need to list them formally. And there is one that's about to be listed that was done with a dossier by, I see Mr. Roger Mohammed right in front, and he did a dossier with the Citizens for Conservation and the San Fernando Corporation, which allows us to list. And that's very important. So all these dossiers now allow us to list a project. That's why it's so important to us. And one of the other things that we do as a National Trust is that we try to, I can't remember the exact words in the act, but it says we must make the public aware and enjoy the beauty and value of our heritage. So that's what a lot of this is about, just really getting people to understand. And that underlining is of course, the whole business of the tourism economy. And I see Michelle smiling here, Michelle Celestin, who has talked about heritage economy for a very long time, and yes, this is what we're talking about, to try and understand that heritage means business as well as enjoying it. So you will see, those of you who have joined, and anybody really, if you want to look on our website or our Facebook page, will see the kinds of things that we're doing. So that's my little introduction and advertisement for the National Trust. I have heard people talk about ICOMOS. ICOMOS means International Council of Monuments and Sites, and it's all over the world. Trinidad and Tobago is the only English-speaking member of ICOMOS. We actually have ICOMOS TT, and we have linked with ICOMOS US, and they have sent us, we just heard, this is the third time we've had interns. And this year, when we heard we were getting 2 interns, we said, right, we're ready for San Fernando. Because we knew that when we came here, we had to do all of these buildings. And not only were they young, and therefore energetic and vigorous, but there were 2 of them. So we thought that this was the perfect time to do these buildings. So the ICOMOS US, they will be going back to do a presentation in the US very soon to see what they're doing, and that will again really stimulate the interest in Trinidad and Tobago and all the amazing things that we have. So just very quickly, I'm here to introduce the 2 of them. Eric Stahlheim, which is here. He's originally from rural Iowa, far away, near Des Moines. So you're near our urban place. And Eric has always had an appreciation of architecture and building structures, and I will tell you very quickly that when we went to Tobago, Eric spent, as soon as he arrived, he created an enormous sand fortress in no time at all, with everything, moat and flag and all kinds of things, just out of the sand. I was just amazed. So it's anything architecture. And he had a Bachelor's of Architecture from Iowa State, and then he did a Master's of Science in Historic Preservation from the University of Notre Dame. Presently, he's working with an architecture firm as a project manager and lead designer, and somehow he managed to get some leave, and he's also a member of his local Preservation Commission Council. Loves football, so he did very well in Trinidad with that, and now he has discovered liming, so he loves liming and he likes to travel. In Trinidad and Tobago, some of his favorite experiences have been visiting the Pitch Lake, learning and engaging with cultural events. He was in the Pan Fest. I can't tell you how many times. Anytime there was Pan, Eric was there, band launch. He reached a band launch, Trinidad food, and in particular pepper sauce. He's probably bringing back a lot of pepper sauce from Trinidad and Tobago. Stephanie Brisita is from Perth Amboy, New Jersey. She's a preservationist. I'll tell you that she also did a very interesting project in the cemeteries, and she's done a whole lot of work. And I promise that before you leave, we will go into the cemeteries and let you see what we have, because we have an amazing cemetery. And maybe after this, we'll have a cemetery tour. After this. Well, for her first degree, she has architectural studies with a concentration in preservation from Philadelphia University, and from her graduate studies, she completed her Master's of Preservation Studies at Tulane University. And she has been working with the National Park Service in California and in Georgia. So these are our 2 interns, and I am now going to hand it over to the 2 of them.
Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. Just a moment. Thank you. Well, as was mentioned, I'm Eric Stahlheim,
I'm Stephanie Brisita.
and we're very happy to be here and excited about this project. Heritage is an important aspect of all cities. As it tells the story of the place's development and importance to past generations, it also brings into focus how contemporary life has changed over the years and provides a model for the future through showing how our communities can both be sustainable, walkable, and culturally vibrant. These places are important to us not because they provide a window into the past, or because they provide a window into the past, but also because they provide identity to places through vernacular character and the culture that inspires. Something which we have lost in recent times, it seems, sometimes. This place, San Fernando, tells a critical story about the development of Trinidad and Tobago, as we understand, but it also expresses how this dual island nation is interconnected with the larger world through trade and diverse cultural influence. Understanding the built environment in this way is important because it is where we live and our lives and is an expression of our present and the culture we choose to portray. Over the course of 10 weeks, we've put together 6 dossiers put together 6 dossiers for 6 of the 7 designated sites for the proposed Plaza San Carlos Heritage District at the King's Wharf in San Fernando. Along with an 8th on the collection of these as the district, we have also put together a series of standards and guidelines for this district so that there is a guidance for how to promote further development and renewed interest in this area and how to do it in a way that is appropriate to the history of this special place. So in today's lecture, our project at the King's Wharf, we will first start with a broad look at San Fernando and the wharf itself and its bright history. And then we will focus more on the 7 structures of interest in this district, which include the general stores, the Happy Corner Hotel, the Tenets Building, which is also commonly referred to as the Rodriguez Building, the former San Fernando Post Office, currently the PTSC station, the block of warehouses collectively referred to as Thorpes Garage, and the fish market and the San Fernando Government Railway Station. Though we did not personally do the dossier for the railway station, we did include it in the district information. To conclude today's presentation, we will then discuss the standards and guidelines a little more fully to give a clear idea of their intention and potential use. So to begin, for orientation, you can see on the right the map of San Fernando and its environs, gives you some idea of the location. And then from the top on the left side, the top is an aerial view from the 1960s, and the bottom is a view from today, just to give you an idea of how things may have changed in the last few decades.
Talk about the history of Plaza San Carlos. Plaza San Carlos was a town square established by the Spanish governor José María Chacón and named after the King of Spain, Carlos IV, in 1792 during the inception of the town. By 1797, the British were in control of Trinidad. King's Wharf's name likely came from the monarchy of British in the beginning of the early 1800s. Throughout the remainder of the 1800s and well into the 1900s, King's Wharf became the main shipping port for the Naparimas, and it would also become one of the most important ports in the country. From the wharf, the city grew and flourished. High Street, the busiest street in San Fernando, was once a royal road from the time of the Spanish and was a direct link between the wharf and the westward sugar estates. Sugar became one of the most important exports for Trinidad. and especially for San Fernando and the Naparimas. The introduction of indentured workers in 1845 served to increase sugar production in the estates. From this, sugar exports at the wharf also increased. The prosperity from sugar, everyone would benefit from the prosperity brought through their sugar exports for people in San Fernando and the Naparimas, but also to the government in Port of Spain. At this time, the wharf was also important for the import of goods and people, both which came by sea, instead of trekking through the mountainous terrain of the island. The increase in sugar production prompted many merchants to ask for a wharf extension. In 1854, the city received a jetty at the wharf, but not the extension needed to accommodate the sugar that was coming into the port, going out of the port. In 1859, the Cepero Tram Road was established in San Fernando, the first of its kind in Trinidad. It went from the wharf to Cepero Crossing, today called Cross Crossing, and all the way to the old Spanish mission. This tram road made previously inaccessible estates and their sugar accessible, meaning more sugar would be on the wharf. Its establishment also created a regular passenger service and mail service between the Naparimas and San Fernando. The use of this tram road became so important, it was considered the principal mode of transportation in the Naparimas in 1860s. For this tram road, a leveled road was cut through the steep hill which is today Chancery Lane. It allowed for the horse-drawn trains to pass through with ease, which had previously overexerted the horses. This made the transport between the wharf and the Naparimas more efficient economically and socially. Though sugar was king at the wharf, it was still teeming with diversity in other merchandise. Meats, produce, provisions, and other products could be found at the wharf. Produce and vegetables coming from as far as Venezuela could also be found there. They even brought fowl, macaws, and parrots for sale. All these vendors and all this merchandise added to the congestion that could be found at the wharf at the time. The extension of the wharf was absolutely crucial to San Fernando and the Naparimas. It was crucial for the economy of Trinidad, for without it, the export of sugar would slow. Merchants at the time went so far as to point out that San Fernando's sugar exports were double that of what left Port of Spain. The railway service came to King's Wharf in April of 1882, an important form of transportation. Knowing the importance of San Fernando and the King's Wharf, San Fernandians at the time could not help but wonder what took so long. The railway brought more people to San Fernando and increased trade. It was important for San Fernando to have this commodity. Finally, in December of 1884, the wharf extension was completed. Though King's Wharf was a hub of commerce and industry, it had also developed socially and culturally. One of the biggest social events to occur in San Fernando was the New Year's Day Regatta. Begun in 1870, it became part of the San Fernando social life, happening annually. This was filled with boat races and competitions, music, festivities, hilarity, and joy. The environment bled into its surroundings, such as the Ice Establishment and Royal Hotel. The elite would fill the verandas of the Royal Hotel to watch the races and would eat and drink at these establishments at the day's end. This event was so grand that people from Port of Spain and other places in Trinidad would travel to compete and watch the regatta. It is also evident that at some point in time, the carnival would pass by or through the King's Wharf. As it can be imagined, the carnival was a festive celebration. The Wharf would also host celebrations of special visitors to San Fernando and the Nat Parimas. Some of these visitors include royal visitors such as Prince Albert and Prince George in the late 1800s. The King's Wharf was also a hub of transportation. First, people coming by sea on coastal steamers, and then through the Cepero tramway from the Nat Parimas, as well as the railway. This helped improve connections for visitors and bringing crowds into San Fernando, further expanding the city. Today, this is still echoed through the existence of the water taxi, PTSC, and the maxi taxis by the Wharf today.
With heritage so rich, we can better understand this place today. In the map before us, we have the proposed boundaries for the Plaza San Carlos Heritage District. The area shaded in yellow in the center is the proposed district proper. The area in red around is a 50-meter buffer zone, which will help temper between the modern city and the heritage district and its structures, character. The purple right here in the center is an indication of the location of the proposed Plaza San Carlos, though it is not defined yet. It's a generalized location. And then the dark squares that you see in the yellow are the heritage sites, which we will discuss shortly. At the right, we have two different diagrams from the Town and Country Planning Division. The top is an urban study that indicates a 5-minute walking radius, among other things, which is useful for understanding the urban qualities of this place. The bottom image is a series of studies on district boundaries that kind of look at different aspects of what makes this place special, from heritage to social and cultural indicators and the like. So at the site, we have our 7 structures of interest. The top, which we can see here. The top left is an image of the Wharf today. Immediately below that is the San Fernando Old Post Office building. Below this is the Tenets Building, also known as the Rodriguez Building. And then the bottom left is the fish market. The top right is San Fernando Government Railway Station. Below that is the Thorpes Garage, then Happy Corner, and then below that is the General Stores building. The San Fernando General Stores is architecturally notable as it is the only structure in the district with a mansard roof, which is this unique roof shape where it's very steep and then it's shallow at the top, which is something unique to the district that we think is architecturally significant. It also includes a frequent number of segmentally arched openings, which means it's not a full half circle, which is common throughout the district, through most of the buildings. For potential uses, we would recommend that the current use remain as long as feasible, and otherwise, if something should happen, we would recommend coffee shop, other shops or boutiques, things of that nature.
General Stores came into prominence when it was owned by Elvira Glasson. Miss Glasson was born in Grenada and moved to San Fernando. She could always be found at different sporting events such as races, selling many different foods and drinks. She owned the ice establishment between 1870 and 1879. When she owned this building, she would be visited here by what many would consider the elite, who would flock to her to continue to enjoy food and drinks and simply have a good time. Her establishment was so popular that the governor of Trinidad during the time, Sir Henry Irving, could not leave a visit to San Fernando without stopping at the ice establishment. In this shop, Elvira would also sell merchandise such as you've seen sugar. From 1870 to 1879, when the Regatta came around, people would enjoy themselves and then return to the ice establishment to keep the festivities going, as I'm sure many San Fernandans love to lime in the past too. It has been speculated that at some point in time, the company Alliston and Company owned the building. They were merchants who were near the wharf who imported a variety of merchandise into San Fernando. By the 1930s and 1950s, these buildings had become an auto supply and repair shop. It was said to have also sold food and general merchandise in 1987. Today, this store sells marine, fishing, and boating equipment. Happy Corner likewise came to prominence thanks to Miss Elvira Glasson, and in her time it was called the Royal Hotel. Similar to the ice establishment, people would flock to her hotel for food, drinks, and enjoyment. Prior to the Wharf's extension in December of 1884, the veranda would be highly decorated and packed with spectators during the regatta. People would cheer on competitors and have a grand time. After the extension occurred, people would not be able to see the regatta from the veranda of her hotel, but would still go to her establishment at day's end to continue the festivities. Over time, the building's social history and ties to Elvira were forgotten. In the 1920s, Happy Corner became known as the Black Cat Hotel and Bar, which has over time gained a reputation for promiscuity. Today, Happy Corner continues to operate as a bar. Both General Store and Happy Corner are significant because of their ties to Miss Elvira. Miss Elvira was a very prominent and loved Black woman in San Fernando. She made a name for herself in the catering sector when on the wharf, all you would find were sugar merchants and people selling other merchandise. The environment her establishments created and the foods and drinks she offered brought people to her, so much so that when she left the ice establishment, they followed her to the Royal Hotel. Even when the Wharf extension in 1884 moved the water's edge from her hotel, especially around the time of the regatta, people would still go to her establishment to continue their merriment. When Elvira passed in 1892, her assets were considered to be very valuable at auction, and at auction were immediately purchased. Both general stores and Happy Corner are also significant for their social and economic history. They were ran as a business by Miss Elvira, and they are still continued. This is still continued today.
Happy Corner is notable for its wraparound balcony, which we can see here. It's character defining in itself, but also because of its features, including wooden fretwork, gingerbread, and elaborate balusters, indicative of the period that it was built and used heavily as the Royal Hotel. Additionally, the building, or a portion of it, has a clay roof, which is also unique to this area. For the use, we would recommend that the current use remain as long as it can. If it is decided that it's feasible in the future, perhaps a boutique hotel or a bed and breakfast could occupy the building, since it is a small structure but was historically a hotel. Next, we have the Thorpes Garage. This block is the last remaining warehouse buildings at King's Wharf. Thorpes Garage is a set of 6 structures, which collectively are known as Thorpes Garage, and they form a full city block. The buildings are all of a warehouse typology and therefore boast large open spaces inside, prime for new uses that require any number of planning, organization, and or space requirements. They also feature access to a public street on both sides, which is not always common in urban sites. These buildings' potential uses that we thought might be appropriate might include an art school or a brewery perhaps, restaurants, boat building, workshops, or startup spaces for small businesses.
Thorpes Garage is a collection of warehouse once owned by multiple companies. The southernmost portion of the building was owned by Tenets Estates Limited, then called Tenets Agency, and was erected in 1885 after the Wharf extension. It was called Tenets Store. Tenet Estates was a company that owned sugar estates in the Naparimas, with their holdings starting back in the 1850s. They exported sugar, rum, and molasses, and imported hardware and field equipment. Through their imports, Tenets Estates was able to amass a great amount of sugar estates when estate owners would mortgage their estates to tenants in exchange for equipment. There is some unclarity on who owned the remaining portion of Thorpes Garage, but it is speculated that some of the other owners were George Lambie and Leon Agostini, both sugar merchants. The Colonial Company, owner of Usin St. Madeleine, one of the biggest producers and exporters of sugar in the area and possibly all of Trinidad, had once owned a portion of Thorpes Garage as well. Between 1936 and 1938, Alliston and Company Limited had become the successor of Tenet Estates and took over some of their offices, which may have included the Tenet Store. At some point, it was also used a garage, henceforth its current name. This building is significant economically. The wharf was the hub of transportation and hub of trade of imports and exports, and was essential to the sugar economy in Trinidad. Because so much sugar was passing through King's Wharf, it became essential for merchants to have storage on the wharf for all their goods. These warehouses provided the proper storage necessary for the sugar industry to grow and prosper in San Fernando and the Naparimas. Tenets Building was erected in 1911 for Tenets Estates, the same company who owned the southern portion of Thorpes Garage. They were prominent in the sugar industry, as noted before. Their equipment imports and sales became so profitable it was turned into a full-fledged business. Tenets Building was erected to accommodate the stock Tenet Estates received, which their warehouse Tenet Store could no longer hold. Tenets Building was leased to Neal and Massey Limited, a car dealer and automotive company, in 1932. They continued to use the building well into the mid-1950s. It is depicted that during their time there, spectators would watch the carnival as it passed by the wharf in the 30s. Around the early 1950s, Rodriguez Engineering also occupied the building, performing auto and marine repairs and sales. After Neal and Massey vacated the building, it was renovated to accommodate government offices, including the extension of the post office. Today, the building houses a variety of vendors on the first floor and is currently unused on the second floor. The exterior has also become a depot for maxi taxis from further south, the brown maxi taxi. This building is significant socially and economically. The wharf was the hub of transportation, of trade and imports, and was essential to this sugar economy in Trinidad. Like Thorpes Garage, the building was important for holding equipment and hardware that tenant estates support and would be used in the Naparimas and therefore help the sugar industry. Thorpes Garage and Tenets Building are also significant for their association to tenants' estates because of their prominence in the sugar industry. Their equipment imports were essential for sugar production in the Naparimas and therefore important to the export of sugar on the wharf and the growth of San Fernando. This building is also significant socially for its participation in celebrations on the wharf, such as the carnival, with people filling the balconies to watch as it passed by on the wharf. It is also socially important as a point of transportation because the wharf itself is an entry to the city of San Fernando.
The Tenets Building is notable for its cast iron and wood wraparound balcony, very key character-defining feature of the structure, and remained through the 1950s renovations, which drastically altered the appearance of the building. The building also features a parapet roof, which just means that the wall extends above the roof structure, which is also unique for this area. It's not seen in any of the other notable structures. For uses, as it was originally an office building, we think that would be appropriate. The ground floor could easily accommodate a restaurant as it was open on 3 sides, or perhaps a craft market similar to what it currently has. A side note, if the trust should ever decide that they would like to invest in a southern office, the upper floor of the Tenets Building would be ideal. It's the right amount of space. It would be a great place to begin tours, hold lectures, and provide the South with an information heritage learning center. And what better place than in the center of a heritage district? Some more information and the location. You can see in the bottom right an example of the original building that's been covered up by stucco and what it looked like during renovations here. Next, we have the San Fernando Old Post Office building. The building's architectural features are rather simple. It does include the segmentally arched openings, which are common. As was noted, at the east and west sides of the building, there are ground level porches with the first floor extending above, which is unique to this building. As we believe it was originally a warehouse, it would have accommodated that function well. This would be a great event space for different types of events in the upper levels. The ground floor could be offices, shops, or the like.
Originally started on the wharf, but was considered unreliable. It moved to High Street sometime after, and by 1866, the service was deemed adequate and regular in the city. The wharf brought in the mail for San Fernando and the surrounding areas, which were delivered using the Cepero Tram road. The office, again in 1884, was moved because the volume of mail entering and leaving the city was growing exponentially in the 1870s and early 1880s. In 1924, the post office was moved back to the Wharf into an old excess warehouse, which was repaired extensively to accommodate the building's new purpose. It shared the building with the Treasury. It was considered convenient to bring the office back to the Wharf and close to the railway station and harbor. It expanded into Tenets Building in the 1950s, and it ceased operation in the early 2000s. Today, it is a terminal for PTSC, though the building was technically owned by PTSC after they acquired all the land and holdings from the railway station, the railway service, back in the 1960s. This building is important because the location of the post office followed what I believe was a path of convenience. Mail came into the Wharf and it was distributed at the Wharf. When it moved to High Street, it was meant to accommodate the many shopkeepers and owners and merchants that were very busy. When it was moved back to the Wharf, it was convenient for the Postal Service and for people to bring these public offices together at the Wharf. Mail and people from other locations would be coming in at the Wharf, some going to go get their mail at this post office. This was still relevant and could be seen even into the 1980s. Today, it is a very convenient location for the PTSC to be because of its proximity to High Street, which is again still very busy here in San Fernando. It is also socially and economically significant. The increase in volume of mail can be attributed to the success of the sugar industry in the Naparimas and the importance of San Fernando as a hub of export for the industry. The Wharf was a gateway of communication and industry and commerce. Jobs and opportunities would come into the city. More people would come into the city. And the mail, again, was transported to the Naparimas through the Cepero Tram road. And more businesses would set up shop here in San Fernando, and which resulted in a growth in population and the increase in and out of the Postal Service, the volume of mail coming in and out of the Postal Service.
Moving on from the post office, next we have the fish market. A marketplace for the exchange of goods has existed at this location at Kings Wharf throughout most of San Fernando's history. It is architecturally marginal, but it is a typical marketplace typology, though it does possess a few minor character-defining features, notably the entry portico or porch with some craftsman-style wood timber beams, and then its utilization of the Tuscan order of architecture, which is the column type, the way it's designed. Often, the Tuscan order is common for marketplaces, although here it's used with paired columns at the corners, and then it has a particular intercolumniation between, which is not always common for that order. So that, in and of itself, is unique to this structure. We highly recommend the retention of the use of this building for the fishermen as a fish market, or a revitalization, perhaps, but we would recommend that it remain a fish market as it is a very important piece of this district's heritage. It's kind of a staple for the,
In 1818, San Fernando was considered nothing more than a fishing village. The fish market can be recalled as being there. A fish market can be recalled as being on the wharf in 1857. A new market was erected in 1890 and again 1906. In 1911, the town councilor, Mr. Johnstone, believed that the fish supply was going extinct, but this was untrue. The fishermen at the wharf said that there was an abundance of fish supply. This may have been so because in 1924, the current fish market, which stands today, was constructed and described as follows. Concrete structure with 20 tables, doubles, of the same material beside a spacious apartment for the market clerk. Within a few minutes after opening, it was busy with trade. It was considered to be up to date at the time. In 1988, a study by FAO on the fish market considered the San Fernando fish market to be the second largest wholesale fish market in Trinidad, handling over 1,000 tons of fish annually. In 2018, it was reported that the fish industry was on the decline. The market was in need of upgrades, and the fishermen were losing fishing grounds, among other problems which are contributing to this decline. I believe this is still true today. The fish market is important because the fishing industry is important to the city of San Fernando. The fishing industry was at the wharf before it became an important sugar export port. This industry is typical of a port city where vendors would set up on the wharf and sell goods. Even though sugar was king at the wharf for a long time, continuous upgrades of facilities to house the fish is evidence that the market prospered. People frequented the wharf to purchase merchandise, which included imports from other places such as Venezuela and merchandise from vendors from San Fernando, such as the fishermen. The market and its proximity to the wharf are important to the fishing industry in San Fernando. It is a piece of the fishermen's livelihood. This building has adapted to change with necessity. Though the fishing industry never met the same magnitude as the sugar industry, it has outlived the latter on the wharf. The wharf and its surroundings are important because they are the fishing grounds for the merchandise, and the market is the conveyor of that merchandise.
And finally, our last structure of interest is the San Fernando Railway Station. We did not personally go do an in-depth study of this, as it had already been done, but we will mention it because it is important to the district. The first Trinidad government railway service to San Fernando was established in 1882. The current neoclassical structure, which is the only proper monumental structure of the district, was completed in 1901 and remained in operation until the last train arrived in San Fernando in 1968. The building was subsequently abandoned. In the last decade, the structure has lost its roof and most all of its windows and doors, though these are known through photographic evidence. The structural walls remain, and examples of all of the key cast iron elements, giving the building a unique character, remain throughout the structure. Through research, photographic evidence, and the architectural assessment, we can determine the timeline of the structure and its various additions. Due to the building's social and economic and historical association, social interest, and its association with the past national development, the San Fernando Railway Station deserves protected status and rehabilitation, and my understanding is that it will be listed by the end of this year, officially. And in conclusion, that is the district. Did you want to add? Yes.
Just to add, we would like to talk about some of the connections that these buildings have with each other. Presently, general stores, the wharf, and the fish market have a connection. This is because they all aid the fishing industry. General stores provides the marine equipment, the wharf supplies the fish, and the market holds the fish. Architecturally speaking, Tenets Building and Happy Corner can be connected. This is through their verandas. Prior to the wharf extension, Happy Corner was up against the water's edge, so the veranda made sense. People could enjoy the view of the sea from there. When Tenets Building was erected, the wharf extension had already been completed. So one might say that this veranda that was on Tenets Building could complement the one on Happy Corner. Another connection that can be seen between the buildings is General Store, the Wharf, and Happy Corner. The Wharf provided the events such as the Regatta, the Carnival, royal visits, ceremonies, and other special events. And General Stores and Happy Corners were locations where entertainment could be had and enjoyed. They are also connected to through the ownership of Elvira Glasson. General Store and Tenets Building and Thorpes Garage are connected through their history in automotive industry. General Stores was once an auto repair shop and garage. Tenets Store was also an auto shop, garage, and dealer, and then Thorpes Garage was a garage. Between the railway station, the Tenets Building, and the old post office and the wharf, a connection of public transportation can be seen. The train would bring people into the city. The Tenets Building, the exterior, is again used as a maxi taxi depot. And the old post office is currently used as a PTS terminal, and the wharf, again, being a gate of entry into the city, as it was historically. Commercially, all these buildings have had history of business. Happy Corner, General Stores, Tenets Building, Thorpes Garage, the Fish Market, and the Wharf. And one last connection is the connection of communication with the wharf, post office, and the railway. Postal service and mail would arrive into the port by sea or by train, and the post office would distribute this mail.
We will now take a 15-minute intermission, and we invite questions.
We're doing something a little different. So give them a little breather and make them. And in particular, we're going to ask them to put down their notes and talk. So we're giving you 15 minutes to ask questions about the district. Is there any burning question? And they will be able to answer it without their notes. Questions? Is there a mic in the audience? There's a mic in the middle. Ashley, you're coming with a question? Oh, no, you have to come to the. Anybody have any questions? Any particular questions on this section? Yes, come to the mic.
Hi, good afternoon. Hi, Chairman Jobert is the name. Hi. I believe there is supposed to be development on the wharf, on the whole waterfront, to upgrade San Fernando and environs. I'm just asking, is this aspect of that development incorporated, that development that is to take place? I don't know if you're all familiar with it though.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, we're familiar with it. We have addressed that, and I think in the next segment, discussing standards and guidelines, that will answer that question more fully. But it has been taken into account.
And in fact, I can say one more thing without letting out any secrets, but in our meeting with UDCOT, they indicated that this area is going to be the first area to be restored. So it's actually part of the whole project. Right. Other questions? Yes? Question? Yes? They want you on the mic to record.
Yes, just a little more on the condition of the buildings, because as presented, I'm not too clear as to what the gap is between what is now, except for, of course, the railway building, for example, Thorpes or general stores. What is the gap between its condition now and probably doing what you are suggesting, that it can remain as it is being used, or it can change to something else in terms of preservation status?
Sure. So this site has the full range, full spectrum of, I guess, condition of these structures. You have the general stores, which is in very good condition, versus the railroad station, which is the complete opposite. Though we do believe that each structure will need to be assessed perhaps more critically by whomever is developing them. For the railroad station and the garage and structures that are in worse condition, we do believe that they are all salvageable and can be reused in the future. Thorpes Garage, for example, would be the next worst building as far as condition after the railroad station, as parts of the roof are missing and it has trees growing inside of it and things like that. But the structure itself, we believe, is stable and would be able to be utilized again. Perhaps more funding is needed, fundraising and the like, for certain buildings over others, but I do believe it is doable. It may take more time, but yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to link that last question to my question in regards to, apart from structural integrity and pulling on your architect and preservation training, that unique engineering structures that they could also be identified as for justification. And I assume that in your next section you will give guidelines regards to that. But I think what is unique about the character design of the buildings is, one, you have the general store, which is brick and mortar, and then you have wooden, and then you have other structural designs. So in terms of justification, not only for National Trust listing, that's one element, but also two, in terms of an example of heritage architectural design, it could be a point of justification.
Yes. And we are hoping that, as you say, these structures, for their importance, will also provide inspiration for the new structures to be planned for the district.
I understand what your research has been about, but I wonder if, when you looked at the hardware, if you were able to get the names of any people who owned hardwares there. Why I'm asking, one Mr. Henry Hart of San Fernando had a big hardware there, and I know because my grandmother used to deal with him. Mrs. Isabel Tiche, who was a minister, made a minister of housing in Trinidad and Tobago later on, was his secretary in that hardware. So I think it would add interest if we could get names of some of the people from those who are still around.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tell her that you did a lot of work in the archives, and some of that information is available.
So we did a lot of work in the archives, going through a lot of the different newspaper articles and some of the yearbooks, which tend to be like a something compiled about everything that was happening in the year before. I tried to go through as many as possible. The yearbooks unfortunately stopped around 1961. Depending on the condition of these yearbooks and the articles, would determine what years and what things I could look at.
Yeah, great. His Worship has just said that if there are people here, and there are people here who have information about a lot of these heritage buildings and any other information, he has agreed that we can submit it to the mayor's office and he will get it on to us so we can add to it, so we can really get the social history and et cetera for these buildings. Yes, Wayne, you had a question.
Thank you very much. And Margaret, welcome to San Fernando. A good place. You have your chance now. A couple other things. One, I know there's at least one crane along the waterfront north of the fish market. I don't know if it is still there and if you guys will be considering that as a structure worthy of conservation. I suspect it is. Secondly, I know a lot of the seawall has collapsed in certain areas. Certainly, on the seaward side of the fish market, the wall has collapsed. There's a little beach there. But I'm not sure how much of it exists north between the fish market and the jetty, what we call the jetty in San Fernando. If there is, I would like to suggest that that is an important structure worthy of conservation, but I know it will be related to the future plans for the waterfront improvement. But that wall, we saw an earlier photograph when that wall was constructed, sometime around 1900, I believe it was.
Okay.
And second to last, the jetty, while the jetty is of more recent vintage, the jetty holds a strong attachment to San Fernando people, right? That's where people used to go and fish and learn to dive and all that kind of thing. Well, far along is to the south and west side, but there are many other things around the area that are very important to San Fernando people. So while the jetty is not old structurally, I don't know if there's any opportunity for it to be integrated somehow into the conservation plans for the area. And lastly, to touch on Margaret's point about sources of information, the assessment rules in the San Fernando City Corporation have excellent records. I've gone through them myself, of the owners, the occupiers, and the users of all the properties in the dense city of San Fernando. I've looked at it certainly from 1910. I didn't try to look at it from before, but it could be useful. And some of the old families, you mentioned the Lambie family. The Lambie family is still around. It's still a San Fernando family mainly. So I just wanted to suggest that. Thank you. And congratulations, and you're doing a good job.
Thank you.
Good evening, folks. Peace, love, and justice to you all. I'm probably going to be a bit of a disruptor here, a disruptor. And the last few questions help to bring it out where people seem to be making a linkage and a connection with things. Well, my name is Owen Bedo, and I like to say that I kind of talk on behalf of the rum shop. And having said that, I will say this: if you ask anybody around San Fernando dealing with that, what Don Carlos, that area there, and you don't mention Steve Rum Shop, you will realize where something is missing.
Okay.
So I'm saying, whilst you pick out these buildings there, and you find some people are asking, where if we can't get a connection with somebody who used to have a place there, and as my friend Mr. Quintal would say, when he used to go down on the wharf, and as Boy Scouts and so on, you find we ask about that. So what I'm saying, if you talk about that here, I know I am saying anything you put and that we get funds and so on to do in San Fernando, welcome, because San Fernando is part of, and the nether part of Trinidad and Tobago, you know. So anything that comes on here, we're glad for it. But having said that, I'm saying if we're going to do this here, I would think that we could look at it to get more people involved into it, and it might register with some people. Let me say this. It was always said, and in fact, I think the question was asked by Fazzy Rally to you all yesterday. When people are doing things with conservation and heritage and architecture and so on, for whom is it? That kind of thing in conservation is a bourgeois thing. You know, the average person is not connected with that at all. So you have to do something to extend, to get us in, so that I am saying that now we are at it, you could think a bit more and not look at these main buildings and look at some of the peripheral things. That's why I talk about Steve Rum Shop. Just across on the southern side, you'll think in terms of that. And I'm using that only symbolically. So we need to do that. And having said that, I will just throw this out to the National Trust. What about Harris Promenade? The whole of Harris Promenade as a historical, architectural area, that and the San Fernando Hill. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And by the way, we do have a dossier on Harris Promenade, and that will be one of the areas that will be listed.
Add to the Heritage District when we discover more information on the different areas.
Okay, I think we've had enough of a break. Oh, sorry, one more question. All right, come, quick. You need to use the mic.
There was a scout house out there and the most popular dance hall. The most popular dance hall used to be out on the sea out there. And there's a piece of iron out there that we used to go and dive. And we used to call that iron. You know, I grew up right around the Wharf here. I attended San Fernando Boys RC. And when the train blew at Skinner's Park at 11:15, we will run a sprint from there to go and pull cane on the train line. But I see that you all haven't been concerned with the marine aspect. You all were more concerned with the land aspect. You know, so I am a bit overwhelmed when I heard the presentation, because a lot of things I've been hearing on the presentation were based on what my great-great-grandmother used to be speaking about, because she was a popular person around this area. She was selling downstairs at the popular nightclub at the corner of San Fernando Street and Cuenca Street. So she was around this area selling. So when I was a little youth around there, and I grew up around this area. So I'm very much taken aback that there are people not from Trinidad who are doing the type of research and sharing the type of information that we need to continue to develop our island. Okay, so have a good evening, everybody. You're all the best.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to go straight. Oh, Roger. Oh, well, we can't. Last comment. I'm sure it's a comment, not a question.
Hello, good day. It's a question. I really like what you guys are doing. The past... Right, can you hear me? In 2012, we started work on the railway station, and the building hasn't been listed yet. And it's only since you guys started this push that we started seeing some action and some things happening. And I just heard Eric said that possibly later this year that building might be listed. That's news to me, so I'm glad that you guys are doing that. I also know that you said that this heritage district is going to be one of the first things that UDCOT is going to focus on. Does that mean that these 7 structures will be fast-tracked through the listing process? Because it does take a while to list a structure. So is it going to be one of those sorts of things that everybody's on board and we're going to do this thing and it's going to be fast-tracked? Or is it going to be another 7 years before these buildings be listed?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't like fast track, so I immediately. But what's going to happen? Some of these buildings are privately owned, and what we've been discussing with UDICOT, some are public. Is how are they? What kind of incentives they're going to start looking at to see how the private sector can come into this. Because, in fact, this is only going to be successful if the private sector really takes it and you get the business activity, etc. going. So this is really an opportunity for the private sector as well as the public sector. And His Worship is going to help me out and respond.
With reference to the TGR building, it has been identified for a museum. It has been submitted, all the demographics, all the information required have been submitted to the ministry, and that will be the first project we're embarking on. I want to give you the assurance that it has been put together and it will happen.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Okay,
and thank you guys.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Okay, so we're going to go back into some of the work. Now, this section was extra, and what we will ask them to do is we have to decide that this is going to happen. And when something is going to happen, we should have guidelines and standards. So there's particular things that they were looking at, and we have done an entire, well, I want to call it a dossier, a document of standards and guidelines so that it'll be easier for restoration for all of these buildings. So that's what we're going to go into next.
Thank you, Margaret. So now we're going to go into the development of the district's specific standards and guidelines. It is important to retain what remains of the King's Wharf area as it represents the history and timeline of San Fernando. This is important as it tells the unique story of San Fernando's development, allowing it to be contrasted with other cities. It is important for individual cities to retain their identity and the regional and local cultural and built environment which reflects the people and culture of that place. As other cities have their own stories of development unique to themselves, so does San Fernando, which is why standards and guidelines are crucial to protect and prolong the things that make San Fernando different from Port of Spain, for example, or other Trinidad cities. Not all cities are created equally, and therefore they should not all copy the urban patterns of other cities blindly. A simple example would be to understand that San Fernando is not inherently a high-rise city. One myth of high-rise buildings is that they bring density. However, the same can be said of low-rise buildings between 2 and 5 stories densely packed, which often provide more urban variety and a more human scale to urban environments. This promotes walkable urban landscapes with human-scaled structures. These standards and guidelines highlight the character-defining elements of the Plaza San Carlos Heritage District as features combined and used in a local and vernacular way. These features are critical to the district as they both provide a neighborhood identity and express the unique cultural and social values of the place. In this case, San Fernando, as it should retain its own character built out of elements which are common to the wider nation of Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean at large. These features may include porches, opening proportions, materials, and roof designs, to name a few examples. To begin, use and procedures is discussed at the beginning of this document to help foster how when changes need to be made or are proposed, there is a clear-cut path on how to do that through application and review by the National Trust and the Ministry of Planning. There's a definitions section which is important. It includes definitions of terminology used throughout. The matrix at the bottom left of this slide is an example of that. The terms in the section more broadly include things like what is recommended based on different topics, what types of things are prohibited, what would be not recommended, etc. This section also includes definitions and explanations of the 4 principal preservation treatments, which are preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, and reconstruction, all of which have a place at the San Fernando, or at the Plaza San Carlos Heritage District. Preservation is defined as the act or process of applying measures necessary to sustain the existing form, integrity, and materials of an historic property. Work including primary measures to protect and stabilize the property generally focuses upon the maintenance and repair of historic structures.
One building that could benefit from preservation is Happy Corner. You can tell by the wooden fretwork that it still retains a lot of its original character, but some of them are a bit dilapidated and need a little TLC. By preserving these pieces and making sure that they're maintained, the historic character of Happy Corner can be retained for the next generations to come to enjoy.
The next treatment is rehabilitation, which is defined as the act or process of making possible a compatible use for a property through repair, alterations, and additions while preserving those aspects or features which convey its historical, cultural, and architectural values.
Thorpes Garage can benefit greatly from rehabilitation. The alterations would give this building a new purpose and allow for multiple uses.
Restoration is defined as the act of or process of accurately depicting the form, features, and character of a property as it appeared at a particular period of time by means of the removal of features that may be later or inappropriate from other periods in its history, and reconstruction of missing features which may have been removed in the past.
Tenets Building, or Rodriguez Building, could benefit greatly from restoration. The coin details at the corner of the buildings are hidden under the plaster, and by restoring this area, by removing the plaster, you can see some of the original features that used to be on this building.
And then the last treatment is reconstruction, which is defined as the act or process of depicting the means of new construction, the form, features, and detailing of a non-surviving site, landscape, building, or structure, or the object for the purpose of replicating its appearance to a specific period of time and in its historic location.
The railway station could benefit greatly from reconstruction. One of its important features, the roof, is missing, and by reconstructing this feature, people can get an understanding of the building and a feel for what it used to be.
Moving beyond definitions, the Standards and Guidelines document includes several sections on key character-defining features found throughout the district, throughout its structures, and it focuses a little bit more on the types of elements within those features that are notable, how they could change and still be appropriate, and be altered or repaired, etc. The first of these is things like the district environment, which includes the public space, streets, streetscapes, street furniture, and things of that nature, which is followed by another section that focuses more specifically on individual lot environment, which might be private property as it relates to lighting and other yards or plantings within a private property's limit. The third section covers building materials, which is a very important section as it discusses the importance of historic materials, how they differ from modern materials in different ways, and their compatibility with modern materials. This section discusses the importance of retaining the original materials of any structure or those materials which are associated with a significant period of the building's history. An example from this section could be masonry work. It is common to repoint masonry work or to repair the mortar between the masonry units or bricks. In other words, the repair would require the analysis of the historic mortar, the composition, color, texture, etc., in order to create a new mix that is compatible. Historic mortars before the 20th century were often made with lime mortar, which is a natural product, more or less, and is a critical element. If, for example, a modern mortar, which includes Portland cement, is used instead, it will lead to expedited deterioration of the masonry and the mortar. Another example would be a process called electrolysis. There are different metals used in buildings, and some of these metals don't always get along with one another. So, for example, steel and aluminum often are not compatible when they are in contact with one another for a long period of time, especially if moisture is present, and they can deteriorate each other or one more rapidly than it normally would. This is important because in restoration work we come across different materials, and if a replacement material is not available and so a new material is introduced, it's something that's important to understand before restoration work is completed, and especially in the design process. The next section deals with roofs. In most cases, the roof of a historic structure is a very significant element in defining the character. This is true of the Plaza San Carlos Heritage District. Its roof shapes, seen here in the top left, include hipped roofs, gabled roofs, mansard roofs, etc. The roofs are primarily covered in corrugated metal panels, and which is common these days. Originally, some of them probably had slate and or clay tile, as is evident on Happy Corner. In all cases, we would recommend for the original roof shape to be retained, and if possible, the original materials reinstated. In new construction, we would encourage the use of these existing roof types and forms to be considered as design tools for new construction or additions to any of these structures. And then the following two sections deal with windows and doors, balconies and porches. As we've seen already, those are very important character-defining features in this district, and a lot can be learned through study and consideration for their maintenance, repair, and inclusion in new structures. Oops, sorry. So up to this point, these topics discussed are related to existing structures. But what happens when new construction is necessary or an addition is required or desired? We've included a section dedicated to new construction, which focuses a lot on scale and proportion and location of the building on a lot. For example, at the bottom, you can see an example of different masses and their location, how they create a different feeling in the streetscape environment. We've included a dedicated section to this, as was noted. And so within the district, this would be much more strict within the district proper. And then within the 50-meter buffer zone, we would allow for a larger variety of materials and or architectural expression, though we would still recommend that it be controlled to a certain degree. The Plaza San Carlos district is characterized by 1- and 2-story buildings, with many having a second or third level within their roof structure. For example, the general stores, as was discussed earlier, with its unique roof design.
A good example of scale would be Tenets Building, which was constructed as a 2-story building, and it feels massive, but complements the area by maintaining continuity in scale with the other buildings. The warehouses, though large, are a single-story building.
The image on the right is an example of how opening proportion can also affect the way a structure reads and or relates with its surrounding context. Something that we feel is important to consider in all large-scale construction projects. Another key component to this is the materiality of these structures. Within the district, we recommend that a general rule of only the use of traditional materials, construction techniques, or very similar, the like, including materials such as masonry, wood, cast iron, be considered. For the 50-meter buffer zone, we would relax this to allow modern materials such as concrete or composite materials, which are becoming more and more widely available, though we would suggest that the character of the structures and their general architectural features be reminiscent of those in the district, more closely rather than, say, all glass structures, for example. In addition to this, the location of parking is a key issue at the waterfront. We would recommend for on-street parking, we would prefer that there is no off-street surface level parking, but that rather parking is given to parking structures where it's necessary, and of course those structures would have to follow the guidelines as far as design, aesthetic, and such. The relationship between the district and the waterfront is critical to the Plaza San Carlos district's value. It's what makes it valuable to us today and important. This means that the water's edge is as it currently lies, is recommended to be protected. This means that the protected and as the boundary of the district proper would be with the water's edge. The 50-meter buffer zone goes beyond this and would extend further than 50 meters into the Gulf to protect views from the district, as it is a key component of how the district developed, its relationship to the water, and so forth. A new boardwalk would be acceptable under the standards and guidelines that actually would be promoted. We would like to see a pedestrian way with multimodal transportation such as bicycles, walking, etc. along the waterfront, provided that it is constructed out of compatible materials, is restricted to where the current water's edge is and retains that location, and that it is perhaps removable for future generations who may decide to do something different, which is also an important factor in any kind of preservation treatment, that whatever new is something that can be undone if it is later desired, without damaging what is the historic assets.
By creating a boardwalk, you can maintain the social culture that was at the wharf. The boardwalk and a repaired jetty should not disturb the character of the wharf, but will complement it and foster the social activity that many Trinis can recall being on the wharf, such as swimming, liming, fishing, just enjoying time at the wharf and being connected to the sea.
We would recommend the repair of the existing jetty and or extension if it is necessary, and also for fishing, if it is desired, perhaps small docks from the wharf, but this would of course be subject to broader design plans. But things that are smaller in scale that do not necessarily detract from the relationship, which is so critical between the plaza, its structures, and the waterfront. We would also recommend that vehicular traffic, specifically along the water, is restricted, if not entirely, that it only allows service vehicles, and that the paving in this area might designate where the roadway would be, but not be necessarily a clear roadway for every driver. Under no circumstances do we recommend that there be any more than a single lane in either direction, because we feel this disrupts the connection for the people in the plaza and the water, that it would create a divide and would not be appropriate for this site. The The standards and guidelines also include a section on building codes and accessibility for disabled persons. We feel that this is an important aspect of historic structures that have often have challenges accommodating accessibility and upgrading to current building codes. Shown here are examples of different ways to address accessibility to buildings with stepped entries. This section also explains the enforcement procedures via the National Trust of Trinidad and Tobago, and another supporting reason for the trust to have a branch office at the Wharf. Sustainability is important, as the reuse of existing structures is inherently sustainable, both in terms of cost, when routinely maintained, of course, and in terms of embodied energy. Embodied energy is the summation of the resources and energy required to take raw materials, for example, clay that is excavated, to turn them into building products. For example, clay turned to bricks, and that whole process of excavating, baking, etc. Additionally, historic materials are often found to be durable, long-lasting, and provided they are regularly maintained. We recommend for the retention of all historic materials for reasons of authenticity, which include as long as they are not deteriorated beyond repair. Building maintenance is something which we cannot stress enough. It is the single most critical element to ensuring safe, clean, properly functioning structures. When maintenance is deferred, roofs begin to leak, walls crack, and we end up with some of the issues we're facing with these proposed structures to be listed. So we highly recommend continued maintenance and/or perhaps in redevelopment plans, the consideration for maintenance plans that would be annual and include basically a list of things that the property owner would follow and check up on every year. Perhaps certain things would need to be done more regularly, like once a month. Other things you could do once a year. From this, we now move into preservation treatments. Preservation treatment briefs. This is an appendix section with 25 preservation treatment briefs, which have sections that cover topics ranging from understanding architectural character, old building construction materials and methods, how to appropriately clean materials, for example, masonry, and the maintenance of these materials. It also discusses things like hazardous material abatement, for example, asbestos or lead paint, and energy efficiency upgrades, and how to do them in a way that is not detracting but supports the energy efficient goals of an owner. They are intended to offer guidance for both owners and designers in the maintenance and repair of these structures. The slideshow images show aspects of masonry restoration and how repointing should be carried out and how doing it in different ways can affect the appearance of a structure. To wrap up this portion of the presentation, these standards and guidelines are intended to provide a framework to allow property owners and designers to better understand the materials and structures within which they would be working. We have at this special place these wonderful structures, and to engage and recognize their importance in the city of San Fernando and at the district and their relationship also beyond San Fernando to the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. To conclude, we would like to thank everyone who has supported us in our research and our efforts with this project. We would especially like to thank the National Trust for hosting us here and bringing us to this wonderful country, fostering this exchange and the exchange of thoughts, ideas, experience, etc. We also for immersing us in Trini life and sharing Trini culture with us so passionately. We have thoroughly enjoyed our time here between hard work and many doubles runs, medium pepper. And we would happily return should the Trust like to invite us back when all of these buildings are listed. And we hope that you enjoyed this presentation. Cheers.
We would like, oops, sorry, just one more thing. we would like to leave you with this quote from an article in 1911 that was connected to one of the buildings, but holds a powerful message for the Wharf and San Fernando. Occupying an important and valuable business site, this well-designed building is bound to attract the attention of the passerby, for in strength and newness, it seems to dominate all else and point hopefully and significantly to the future. And well it may, for take it as one will, the large amount expended by Tenant Estates Limited is nothing but a hearty vote of confidence in the future of San Fernando. Thank you.
You to ask any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, and then congratulations on your study.
Thank you.
Just want to start at the end point. I hope the audience understands that even though you go to the National Trust listing of any of these properties, it's the cost of a carnival costume if you knock it down. It's $5,000 TT dollars to knock down any one of those buildings after you listed it. So that's one of the gaps we have to face with. Now, one of the key things I want to share with the audience and share with you is your last presentation. It's the most critical action that we need to implement in policy and law in Trinidad and Tobago. First of all, at the mayor's level, in its engineering department, the council can pass a resolution that these guidelines are be used as a city standard for the municipality or the borough, the municipality of San Fernando, 1. 2, at the national trust level, when they go to list under clause 26 and 30 of the national trust regulations, they could do an order, not just list the building, but they could include this as a condition order for regulation of this district as they list. Because what has happened in the past with national trust listings, we just list a building. But it's easy to bulldoze or rechange or whatever, and the penalty is only $5,000. So putting in this order or this regulation is the controlling factor. Yes. But at a higher level, having PS or planning here, it's important for her to bring together her director of planning and under the Planning and Development Act, that these regulations also be considered and identified as a control order, because governments go and come, PSAs go and come, public servants go and come. But the key thing is that policies and regulations will stay as a guideline of policy and standards. So we have to look at continuity beyond a 5-year cycle and charge the technical officers who are here to use professional and scientific standards as a basis for moving forward. Under the tongue and planetary regulations, we only have a guideline standard of this layout and land use, etc., but not in terms of preservation standards. So this is important to lobby implement as a strategic action. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one other question. Do you have any wild kind of estimate, gauge, any finance what to relate this to? I know everything is highly speculative, very much in the future, and so on. But somewhere along the line, do you have some kind of figure? This is really from Mrs. McDowell, along the line, so, it's something between $1 billion and $2 billion. That kind of wild. We must have some kind of thing to go by. So if we're talking to people and say, they want to do something like that there, and they ask you, you can say, well, boy, that'll be costing more than $1 billion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? I could speak for the general stores, and I think there was a question earlier on. You spoke of your aunt, Miss Teixier? Someone who worked as a secretary and went on to work in the ministry. General Stores is actually owned by the president of the Greater San Fernando Chamber of Commerce. He is also the owner of RM Plaza, etc. So I think we could speak for General Stores that you're going to keep the building up because you continue to maintain the building. So that we know is going to stay with the trust on behalf of that. Incidentally, we spoke of the regattas earlier on. Independence Day, the Greater San Fernando Chamber will be in association with the Dragon Boat Association of Trinidad and Tobago. There will be a regatta on Independence Day at the Yacht Club.
So that's going to be happening. Any further questions? The estimate? You asking that kind of question in Trinidad? Yeah, can you answer that question? Is that a question that you can answer? He says it's beyond the scope of his work. I think that's a question that we're going to have to ask the city planners, and because remember, some of these buildings are private buildings. So they're going to have to, as the chairman had indicated, it's a private sector initiative and participation. Some will be to the state, some will be private sector, as in the case of Mr. Singh. He's going to work with the trust and, of course, the mayor. But we have to determine that with the rest of the buildings that are now listed on this site. Right? I'm sorry I'm not as garrulous as you are. Anyway, I'd like to welcome Mr. Hanif Benjamin, who is attached to the ministry and, of course, a psychologist. Thank you very much, Mr. Benjamin. And can we thank these folks for they've been on their feet? That's it. So I suppose we can return it to your seats. Thank you very much. Someone was complimenting your Kevin Costner type mustache. Yeah, Dances with Wolves. I'd like to welcome now Ms. Kira Roop Singh to give us the vote of thanks before we start closing up. There are refreshments outside that are provided so we can have a little eat. That's the San Fernando, that's the way we do things in South Trinidad. We don't leave you without eating. All right, so we're going to give you something to go off with before we say goodbye. Kira, please.
All right, good evening, everyone. All protocols observed. So, as you can tell, they've done a lot of work for the last 2.5 months. And this is just a snapshot of the work that they've done. It's actually in the dossiers in the back table there, and the standards and guidelines is, I think, over 130 pages long. So this was really just a snippet of all the work that they've done. So we encourage you to read it, and we will try to publish it to make it accessible to everybody. It will also be available in our resource library at the National Trust office in Sackville Street, Port of Spain. So some of the people who have contributed to the research, we just want to acknowledge them. So Angela B. Singh, of course, the true historian of the South. Patricia Bissessa for sharing his work with us. Yvette Rosso, the National Archives of Trinidad and Tobago. The Alma Jordan Library at the University of the West Indies. The Nallis Heritage Library as well. The Assessment Office in San Fernando. Roger Mohammed, who actually created the dossier of the San Fernando Railway Station. Wilfred Watson, and within the San Fernando Regional Corporation, of course, we have to thank the mayor. So as soon as we came to the mayor, yes. As soon as we presented this project to him, there was no hesitation. He jumped on board and said, yes, we are doing this. So thank you, Mayor, for all your support. Mr. John Kissoon of the City Corporation, the San Fernando Municipal Police, and Ms. Amanda Lewis from the Regional Corporation. Your Worship, if I may make a plug for Amanda, she's been amazing. I'm not sure what her designation is, but this is my little plug for her, like Christmas bonus or something. But she's worked tirelessly to get this event going, everything moving. Now, the standards and guidelines were based off of some research done by the University of Florida in the 1980s. So I just wanted to acknowledge University of Florida and all the work that they did beforehand. The Town and Country Planning Division of the Ministry of Planning. Oh my gosh. Is anybody here from Town and Country? Yes? A large group? Awesome. So Town and Country Planning, really, you guys got this started, and we just kept the ball rolling. So thank you very much. We hope to also present these standards and guidelines to you all, and hopefully you can turn it into policy. The Ministry of Public Administration, the Properties and Real Estate Division for providing the housing. The Ministry of National Security, specifically the Work Permits Unit, We always seem to get a waiver of the work permit fee for interns every year, and that's probably because the PS there is our past chairman, Mr. Val Lewis. Back into the Ministry of Planning, when this project was being conceptualized last year, December, we had a DPS Sterling Chady at the ministry at that time. And I just wanted to acknowledge the work that he did in helping us get the cabinet note through. I think that was the first time I spoke directly to DPS or PS, because he called and he said, okay, this is what we need to do, and we got it done. So I just wanted to acknowledge him and say thank you. And to all the PS of Planning as well, Joanne Deiraj, and as well as the Minister of Planning. Now, I am not a CEO or a manager, but I have always felt their support through this project to everything that the trust has done. Just as a regular staff member, your presence has been felt within the trust. So thank you very much. Thank you to Hansley Ajoda for being the MC for tonight. Thank you very much. Thank you to the media for coming out, the patrons, the members of the trust, supporters, and of course, last but not least, to the interns, Eric and Stephanie. So I particularly want to thank you all for your dedication to this project. I know we just sort of handed it to you and said, hey, this is what you're coming to do in Trinidad. Hope you enjoy it. And they've been giving 110% to the point where I had to tell them, stop working, let's go have some beers. So your work ethic has been phenomenal. You've inspired the staff as well. And of course, we will keep you up to date on everything that's happening within the Plaza San Carlos Heritage District. They were not only engaged with this project, they have also engaged with our culture. So I have to say, Steph, sorry, I'm gonna rat you out here. Stephanie, every day, Monday to Friday, would take a little trek down to the doubles cart and buy 3 doubles slide pepper every morning because she had to have it. And I know you've made your batch of green seasoning, right, to take back with you. It's been approved by a Trini mom, yes, so it's gotten a seal of approval. And her Pomerac chow, there we go. And Eric, I know as an architect, I've been seeing you secretly taking sketches of everything you drive by in Port of Spain and on any of the tours that we've been on. So I'm sure your book is filled with sketches of Trinidad and Tobago, and I know you're gonna be happy to share it with the rest of your office when you go back. So that is it for me. So thank you very much to all of you for attending, and please continue to spread the word about the National Trust. Thank you. Oh. One last thing, I'm so sorry. The staff of the National Trust, my team. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for all the hard work that you've done for this event and for supporting the interns throughout the 2.5 months that they've been here. Thank you.
Okay, so, and we go to the dossier presentation that we're going to be making right now. And just before we do that, to members of the National Trust and to the chairman and to the Ministry of Planning and Town and Country, the most prominent writer in Trinidad and Tobago is Mr. Michael Anthony, who I befriended in my days at Trinidad and Tobago Television. He wanted a year in San Fernando to be shot and filmed. One of the things he had spoken to me about was shooting the film. I told him, however, it will be prohibitive, simply because San Fernando does not look like anything you've described in the novel anymore. These buildings are critical to that. And that if you do get it done, Michael Anthony is 90-something years old. We really would like to see that, as we did with Green Days by the River, disappointing as it was, that a year in San Fernando would be done, and the possibilities that these buildings can provide for that film before he passes away. Right? Thanks.
All right, so we just wanted to present some of the work that has been done to the property owners. So I understand that the owner of General Stores is here. Could we start with you, sir? And Margaret, could you please present the General Stores dossier to the property owners? So from what I hear, it's going to be there for a long time to come. So I'm really glad to hear that. And hopefully this dossier can give him some more inspiration for the preservation. Mr. Ali is here from the Ministry of Agriculture for the Tenets Building, Rodriguez Building. Or he was here as he left. Okay, so, well, I just wanted to acknowledge Mr. Ali, who, after some persuasion, let us inside the Rodriguez Building upstairs to take some measurements and photographs. So next we have the Town and Country Planning Division. So we wanted to please present you all with the district dossier, and of course we'll continue to talk to you all about the standards and guidelines. Yeah. Next, we'd like to present the Ministry of Planning with all of the dossiers, the standards and guidelines, the district dossier as well. Hopefully, it can go in the ministry's library and be available for the public to use. And Your Worship, if you can join us in the front, we'd like to present the Mayor of San Fernando with all the dossiers, the district dossier, and as was suggested by the audience, hopefully this can become policy now.
The displays, yeah. Yeah. Yes. He told me secretly that he won't return it. He said, but tell them we will. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Refreshments are going to be served to the National Trust, to His Worship the Mayor, Junior Regrello, and everyone concerned here tonight. Thank you ever so much. Your presence is...
Somebody's asking me, who was this lady who was doing the thank you? The lady who's doing the thank you is one of our most senior members of the trust, because she's been here all of, how many years? 5. So she's the second most senior person in the trust. And really, Kara has been an absolute live wire with this. And I want to tell you that Kara was an intern with ICOMOS in Nantucket. So this is an exchange. So that she did work in Nantucket, and now after that she's got these people down. And every year she's managed successfully to get interns. So I want to thank you, Kara, very much.
Thank you very much, and have a very good evening, everyone.